Hold her still. It will grow back. The laughter around table 12 stopped sounding like laughter the moment Elena Brooks realized the electric clippers were actually touching her hair. 10 minutes earlier, she had been carrying a tray of champagne through the private dining room of Bellini's, one of the most exclusive Italian restaurants in Chicago, trying to finish another double shift without drawing attention to herself. Now 3 wealthy guests had cornered her near the service hallway after deciding the curvy waitress who had refused to flirt with them needed to be taught how to have fun. Elena was 32, warm-eyed, full-figured, and stronger than most people guessed when they first looked at her. She had spent years pretending cruel comments did not hurt, pretending she did not notice customers whisper about her size, pretending it did not matter when managers told her she should be grateful for any job that kept her out of sight. She had learned to smile through embarrassment because rent was due every month, her mother needed medication, and pride did not pay bills. But tonight, as a woman in a silver dress raised her phone to record, and one of the men dragged the clippers across another section of Elena's dark hair, something inside her stopped bending. "Get your hands off me," Elena said, her voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the music. The man laughed. "Relax. We tipped enough to buy your whole night." Elena shoved his wrist away. The tray crashed to the floor, glasses breaking across the tile as restaurant staff gathered at the end of the hallway. No one stepped forward. The manager, Mr. Harlan, looked terrified, not for Elena, but for the reputation of his wealthy guests. "Elena," he warned quietly, "do not make this worse." She stared at him. Half her hair hung unevenly around her face. A few dark strands rested against the shoulders of her white uniform shirt. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to cry in front of them. "They did this to me," she said. Mr. Harlan glanced toward the private room where the guests were still smiling. "They are important clients." Elena gave a small, broken laugh. "And I am what?" Nobody answered. Across the city, Adrian Moretti was ending a meeting that had made 6 dangerous men afraid to breathe too loudly. Adrian was 38, the feared head of the Moretti crime family, a man whose wealth stretched through construction companies, nightclubs, shipping contracts, and businesses most people knew better than to ask about. He wore control like armor. He spoke quietly, moved carefully, and had not trusted easily since betrayal inside his own family had cost him someone he loved years ago. Enemies called him cold. Allies called him impossible to deceive. Elena called him husband, although almost no one at Bellini's knew it. Their marriage had been kept private for one reason. Elena had begged Adrian not to let his name become the reason people treated her differently. She wanted to earn her own paycheck, keep some part of her ordinary life, and prove to herself that becoming Adrian Moretti's wife did not mean disappearing inside his power. Adrian had agreed, even though every instinct in him hated the idea of her walking into a room without protection. What Elena did not know was that he had broken one promise. A trusted driver stayed within 2 blocks whenever she worked late. That driver was now standing outside Bellini's, staring at a message from a frightened dishwasher. Inside, Elena bent down and picked up her broken name tag. One of the men lifted the clippers again. "Come on, sweetheart, let us finish the job." Elena rose slowly. "Touch me again and I call the police." The woman recording rolled her eyes. "Do you know who we are?" Elena looked directly at her. "Right now, you are people humiliating a waitress because you think she cannot fight back." For the first time, the smiles faded. Then Mr. Harlan stepped between them, but not to protect Elena. "Go home," he whispered. "I will deal with this tomorrow." Elena swallowed. "Am I fired?" His silence answered her. She untied her apron with trembling fingers, folded it carefully and placed it on a nearby table. She would not give them the satisfaction of watching her beg. Then the front doors of Bellini's opened. Conversations in the dining room died one by one. 2 men in dark suits entered first. Behind them came Adrian Moretti, still wearing the charcoal coat he had worn to his meeting. He took 3 steps into the restaurant before his eyes found Elena. He saw the broken glass. He saw the clippers. Then he saw what they had done to her hair. Adrian stopped completely. The room went silent. Elena's breath caught because she knew that expression. It was the face he wore when someone had just made a mistake they could not take back. One of the wealthy men frowned at him. "Who are you supposed to be?" Adrian never looked away from Elena. His voice was calm enough to make the entire room colder. Her husband. Adrian's words landed harder than a shout. For one long second, nobody moved. The man holding the clippers slowly lowered his hand. The woman with the phone stopped recording. Even Mr. Harlan looked as though the floor had shifted beneath him. Elena stood near the broken glass, one hand pressed against the side of her head, staring at Adrian with a mixture of relief and fear. She knew exactly what his presence meant. Adrian Moretti never entered a room without changing the balance of power. He walked toward her without rushing, his eyes never leaving her face. When he reached her, he ignored everyone else. He removed his charcoal coat and placed it gently around her shoulders, covering the strands of hair clinging to her uniform. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was quieter now. Elena shook her head, then hesitated. Not physically. Something changed in his expression. It was small, almost invisible, but Elena saw it. Adrian looked at the uneven sections of her hair, then at the clippers in the man's hand. Who touched her? Nobody answered. Adrian turned his head. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. I asked a simple question. The woman in the silver dress immediately pointed at the man beside her. It was just a joke. She was being dramatic. Adrian looked at her phone. "You recorded it?" She swallowed. "We were having fun." Elena pulled his coat tighter around herself. "They said I should be grateful because they tipped well." Adrian's jaw tightened. He turned toward Mr. Harlan. "And you allowed this?" The manager's face went pale. "Mr. Moretti, I did not know she was your wife." Adrian stared at him for several seconds. "That is your defense?" Harlan opened his mouth, but Adrian stepped closer. "You needed her to belong to a powerful man before you believed she deserved basic respect?" The words struck Elena differently than everything else had. Adrian was not defending her because she was his possession. He was defending her because what happened was wrong. The distinction mattered. Harlan looked down. "I was trying to protect the restaurant. You fired her." I panicked. Adrian glanced toward the private dining room, then toward the frightened staff gathered nearby. "Who owns this building?" Harlan blinked. "The Bellini Hospitality Group." "Not anymore." A murmur moved through the room. Adrian took out his phone and called someone. "Daniel, the Bellini property on West Monroe. Freeze every pending agreement connected to the management group. I want the ownership records and lease terms on my desk tonight." Harlan looked stunned. "You cannot do that." Adrian ended the call. "I can." Elena touched his arm. "Adrian?" He looked down at her immediately, the coldness in his eyes softening only for her. "I do not want people losing their jobs because of me." Adrian studied her face. Even humiliated, even standing in a hallway where no one had protected her, she was still thinking about the dishwasher, the servers, the cooks. That was Elena. It was one of the reasons he had noticed her 2 years earlier, when she gave her own dinner to an elderly homeless man behind a cafe and insisted she was not hungry. "They will not," Adrian said. "Only the person who decided your dignity was less valuable than a customer's money." Harlan's shoulders dropped. Elena exhaled slowly. Then a young busboy stepped forward. He could not have been older than 19. "Mr. Moretti, I saw everything." Harlan turned sharply. "Luis, go back to work." Luis did not move. They were bothering her before tonight, for weeks. Elena's head snapped toward him. Adrian's gaze became still. "What do you mean?" Luis swallowed. "The same group came in 3 times. They kept requesting Elena's section. Mr. Harlan knew." Elena stared at her manager. Harlan's face drained of color. "That is not true." "There are security cameras," Luis said. Adrian looked toward the ceiling. Harlan moved too quickly. "Those cameras have been broken for months." Adrian's eyes narrowed. Elena noticed it too. A lie told too fast. Adrian stepped closer to the manager. "Show me the security office." Harlan refused to meet his eyes. "There is nothing to see." Then Elena remembered something. Earlier that evening, she had walked past the office and seen the security monitor glowing through the half-open door. "He is lying," she said quietly. Adrian turned toward her. "Are you sure?" Elena nodded. "The cameras were working tonight." The restaurant went silent again. Adrian looked at Harlan, but before he could speak, the woman in the silver dress grabbed her purse and headed toward the exit. One of Adrian's men calmly blocked the doorway without touching her. I have somewhere to be, she snapped. Adrian's attention shifted to her. You were comfortable recording Elena when you thought she was alone. You can stay long enough to watch the rest. Elena frowned. Something about the woman's sudden panic felt wrong. Adrian noticed it too. He held out his hand to Elena. Come with me. She looked at his hand, then at the dozens of people watching. For years, she had avoided using his name because she never wanted his power to become her identity. But tonight he was not asking her to hide behind him. He was asking her to stand beside him. Elena placed her hand in his. Together they walked toward the security office. Harlan followed several steps behind, visibly shaking. When Adrian opened the door, the monitor was still running. Luis had been telling the truth. Adrian rewound the footage. The screen showed Elena serving the private room. It showed the insults. It showed Harlan watching from the hallway. Then Adrian froze the image. Several minutes before the humiliation began, Harlan had entered the private room and handed the woman in the silver dress a small envelope. Elena leaned closer. Why was he paying her? Adrian did not answer. He zoomed in on the envelope. A black symbol was printed across the corner, a symbol he had not seen in years. Elena felt his fingers tighten around hers. Adrian? His face had gone completely cold. This was not random. Elena looked from him to the frozen image. What does that mean? Adrian stared at the symbol from the family that had betrayed him years ago. It means someone wanted you humiliated tonight. He turned toward her, and for the first time since entering the restaurant, there was something darker than anger in his eyes. There was fear, and they wanted me to see it. Adrian kept staring at the black symbol on the envelope, his thumb slowly brushing across Elena's knuckles, as though reminding himself she was still beside him. The mark belonged to the Valenti family, a name that had almost disappeared from Chicago after a betrayal 8 years earlier, left one of Adrian's closest relatives dead and forced him to rebuild his organization from the ground up. He had believed the Valentis were finished. Apparently, someone wanted him to believe that for a very long time. Elena looked at the frozen security image. Why would they care about me? Adrian did not answer immediately. He hated the answer forming in his mind. Because you are the one person they think can make me react emotionally. Elena pulled her hand away. Then this happened because of you. The words were quiet, but they struck him harder than accusation. Adrian turned toward her. Possibly. She looked at the uneven reflection of herself in the dark security monitor. I spent years trying not to be known as Adrian Moretti's wife. I wanted one thing in my life that belonged to me. I know, and now people I have never met are using me to get to you. Adrian stepped closer but did not touch her. That is why I wanted protection around you. Elena's eyes flashed. Protection I did not know about? Adrian went still. He realized too late that he had revealed more than he intended. Elena stared at him. You had someone watching me? A driver stayed nearby when you worked late. You promised me you would not do that. I promised I would not interfere with your life. You followed me. I kept you safe. Elena shook her head. Those are not the same thing. Before Adrian could respond, a crash sounded from the hallway. One of his men opened the security door. The woman in the silver dress had tried to leave through the kitchen. She was now standing near the back entrance with her purse clutched tightly against her chest. Adrian walked out with Elena beside him. What is your name? He asked. The woman lifted her chin. Vanessa Cole. Adrian recognized it immediately. Vanessa was the daughter of Gregory Cole, a real estate investor whose company had quietly purchased several properties near Moretti-controlled warehouses during the previous year. Adrian had dismissed the purchases as business expansion. Now they looked very different. Who gave you the envelope? He asked. Vanessa's confident expression cracked. I do not know what you are talking about. Elena stepped forward. The camera shows Harlan handing it to you. Vanessa glanced toward the manager. Harlan looked ready to disappear into the wall. It was money, he blurted. They paid me to schedule Elena in the private room tonight. Elena's stomach tightened. You knew what they planned? No. I swear. They said they wanted to embarrass you. I thought it would be a few jokes, maybe a video. Elena stared at the man who had employed her for 3 years. You sold me for a joke. Harlan lowered his eyes. Adrian's voice turned dangerously calm. Who contacted you? Harlan swallowed. A man named Marcus Vale. Adrian's expression changed. Marcus Vale had once handled security for the Moretti family. 3 years ago, Adrian had fired him after discovering unexplained payments and missing inventory. Marcus had vanished before Adrian could learn who had been paying him. The betrayal had never been proven. Now the missing pieces were beginning to connect. Adrian looked at Vanessa. "Where is Marcus?" "I do not know." Wrong answer. Elena touched Adrian's wrist. The gesture was small, but it immediately softened the sharp edge in his posture. "Adrian," he looked at her. She shook her head once. She did not want threats. She wanted truth. Adrian understood. He turned back to Vanessa. "You can speak to the police, or you can explain everything here before they arrive. Your choice." Vanessa's face drained of colour. "Police?" Elena had already taken out her phone. "Yes, police. You recorded an assault because you thought it was entertainment." Vanessa looked around, realizing for the first time that Adrian was not going to erase the incident with money or intimidation. He was letting Elena decide what happened next. "Marcus said nobody would get seriously hurt," Vanessa whispered. "He said the video only needed to reach Adrian." Elena frowned. "Why?" Vanessa looked directly at her. "Because he wanted Adrian angry enough to make a mistake." Adrian's phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. Adrian answered. "Talk." Daniel's voice came quickly. "We checked the building records. Bellini's management company was purchased 6 months ago through a shell corporation. The controlling investor is Gregory Cole." Adrian slowly looked at Vanessa. Her face told him she already knew. Then Daniel continued. "There is something else. Someone accessed Moretti financial records tonight using Elena's employee identification from Bellini's network." Elena froze. "That is impossible." Adrian's gaze shifted to the security computer. Daniel's next words made the room colder. "The transfer request carries Elena Brooks Moretti's digital authorization. On paper, it looks like your wife just tried to move $2 million from a Moretti account." Elena stared at Adrian. "I did not do that." He looked at her without hesitation. "I know. But outside the security office, police sirens were already approaching, and Adrian understood exactly what Marcus had planned. Humiliate Elena, provoke Adrian, then frame her as the traitor inside his own family." The restaurant doors opened. 2 officers entered with a detective behind them. The detective looked directly at Elena and said, "Mrs. Moretti, we need to ask you about a financial crime reported under your name." Elena did not move when the detective spoke her name. Adrian did. He stepped half a pace closer, not in front of her this time, but beside her, making it clear she would answer for herself and would not answer alone. The detective introduced himself as Thomas Reed and explained that the bank had flagged an attempted transfer from a Moretti business account less than 20 minutes earlier. Elena listened carefully, forcing herself to ignore the humiliation still burning across her scalp. "I was serving tables 20 minutes ago," she said. Reed glanced toward the security office. "Then the footage may help establish that." Adrian watched the detective closely. "You received the report quickly," Reed nodded. "The bank contacted our financial crimes unit because the authorization was connected to an account already under review." Adrian's eyes narrowed. That detail was new. Elena noticed. "Under review for what?" Reed hesitated. "I cannot discuss an active investigation in front of everyone." Adrian looked toward the dining room. "Then we move somewhere private." Reed agreed, and minutes later Elena, Adrian, Reed, Daniel, and 1 uniformed officer stood inside Bellini's upstairs office while Harlan and Vanessa waited downstairs. Elena sat near the window, Adrian's coat still around her shoulders. The city lights reflected against the glass, showing her an uneven silhouette she barely recognized. Adrian noticed her staring at her reflection. Without saying anything, he moved between Elena and the window, blocking it. She looked up at him. "You do not have to hide it from me." "I am not hiding it." His voice softened. "I am reminding you that what they did does not get to define what you see when you look at yourself." Elena's throat tightened, but before she could answer, Daniel placed a laptop on the desk. "I pulled the access logs." Reed stepped closer. "Can you identify where the authorization originated?" Daniel nodded. "Bellini's network, exactly like I said. But there is something strange. Elena's employee account was used to enter the system, yet the device was not one of the restaurant terminals." Elena frowned. Then what was it? Daniel turned the screen. A private laptop connected to Bellini's Wi-Fi at 9:14 p.m. Adrian looked at the timestamp. When was Elena attacked? 9:16, Daniel replied. Elena's eyes widened. So someone logged in 2 minutes before they started filming me. Reed leaned over the desk. That suggests coordination. Adrian's expression hardened. It was a distraction. Suddenly, Elena remembered something. Before the private room guests had cornered her, she had carried a tray past the upstairs staircase. A man in a dark service jacket had nearly bumped into her while coming down. At the time, she assumed he worked in maintenance. Now one detail returned with painful clarity. He had been carrying a black laptop case. I saw someone, she said. Every man in the room turned toward her. Where? Adrian asked. Near the stairs. Maybe 5 minutes before everything happened. Reed took out a notebook. Describe him. Elena closed her eyes briefly. About 6 feet tall, grey hair at the temples, dark service jacket. He had a scar near his left eyebrow. Adrian went completely still. Daniel looked at him. Marcus. Elena opened her eyes. That was him? Adrian nodded. If your description is accurate, yes. Reed immediately radioed the officers downstairs and ordered a search of the restaurant. Adrian reached for Elena's hand but stopped before touching her, giving her the choice. She looked at his open palm for a moment, then placed her hand in it. He was here, she whispered, watching all of it. Not anymore. You do not know that. Adrian said nothing, because she was right. A minute later, Reed's radio crackled. No sign of Marcus. But an officer had found a discarded service jacket in the alley behind Bellini's. Inside the pocket was a small wireless drive. Daniel examined it carefully before connecting it through an isolated device. Several encrypted folders appeared. One was labelled Moretti accounts, another was labelled Bellini footage, the third carried Elena's name. Adrian's grip tightened around her hand. Open it. Daniel clicked. The folder contained photographs of Elena leaving work, buying groceries, visiting her mother, and walking home months before Adrian secretly assigned the driver to watch her. Elena stared at the screen, her face losing colour. Adrian looked sick. These were taken before my security started. Elena whispered, How long has he been following me? Daniel scrolled further. At the bottom was a document created 8 months earlier. The title read Leverage Plan. Reed opened it. The first page contained one sentence. Use the wife to break the husband. Elena felt Adrian's hand turn cold around hers. Then Daniel noticed a second file hidden beneath it. There is a video. Adrian looked at him. Play it. The screen filled with grainy footage recorded inside a parking garage 3 months earlier. Marcus stood beside another man whose face was hidden from the camera. Their voices were faint but clear enough. Marcus said Elena's name. Then the hidden man answered with a sentence that made Adrian stop breathing. Do not hurt her until Adrian believes she betrayed him. Elena looked at Adrian. Why would that matter? Adrian stared at the screen, recognition spreading across his face as the hidden man lifted one hand into view. On his finger was a Moretti family ring. Adrian's voice dropped to a whisper. Because Marcus is not working alone. He looked at Daniel. That ring belongs to someone inside my family. Adrian stared at the frozen image of the Moretti ring until the silence in the office became unbearable. Elena had seen him angry before, but this was different. Anger made Adrian colder. Betrayal made him quiet. Daniel enlarged the frame, sharpening the silver crest until one detail became visible beneath the family emblem, a narrow black stone set into the band. Adrian's expression changed. There are only 4 rings like that. Reed folded his arms. Who has them? Adrian looked at Daniel. Myself, Daniel, my uncle Vincent, and my cousin Luca. Daniel immediately raised his right hand. His ring had no black stone. Mine was replaced 2 years ago. Adrian nodded once. Which leaves Vincent or Luca? Elena watched his face carefully. She knew Vincent Moretti only as the polished older man who had toasted their private wedding and called her the calm Adrian had spent his life avoiding. Luca was younger, charming, and always smiling. But Elena had never trusted how quickly his eyes measured every room he entered. Reed closed the laptop. I need both men located before either of them knows we have this video. Adrian took out his phone, but Elena stopped him. No. Everyone looked at her. Adrian lowered the phone. What? Elena stood, pulling his coat tighter around her shoulders. If one of them has been planning this for months, calling your people could warn him. Daniel frowned. She is right. Elena looked at the footage again. Marcus wanted Adrian angry enough to make a mistake. So what would he expect Adrian to do after discovering a traitor? Adrian understood first. Call a family meeting. Reed nodded slowly. Which could put everyone in one place. Elena's eyes moved to Adrian. Or put you exactly where they want you. Adrian studied her for several seconds. Hours earlier, strangers had humiliated her in a restaurant hallway. Now she was standing in the middle of a conspiracy and seeing the trap before men who had survived years in his world. Then we do not give them the meeting they expect, he said. Daniel leaned closer. What are you thinking? Adrian's answer was simple. We make them believe Elena is being taken to the Moretti house. Elena's face tightened. As bait? Adrian immediately shook his head. No, not you. Then it will not work. Elena, they built this around me. They watched me for months. They framed me. They humiliated me because they believed you would stop thinking clearly when I was hurt. She stepped closer. So let them keep believing that. Adrian's voice dropped. I will not put you in danger to prove a point. Elena held his gaze. Then do not put me in danger. Let me help you expose whoever did. Reed intervened. We can use an empty vehicle, controlled route, officers nearby. Mrs. Moretti never has to leave this building. Adrian looked at Elena. She waited. This time he did not decide for her. Your choice, he said. Elena nodded. Do it. 20 minutes later, a black SUV left Bellini's through the rear alley with two of Adrian's security men inside. From the street, it looked exactly like the vehicle normally used to transport Elena. Reed coordinated with plainclothes officers positioned several blocks away. Adrian remained upstairs with Elena and Daniel, watching the route through a secured traffic feed. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then a dark sedan pulled away from the curb and began following the SUV. Daniel leaned toward the screen. We have company. Adrian's jaw tightened. The sedan followed for 6 blocks before turning into an underground parking structure near the river. The SUV continued forward. Reed's voice came through the speaker. Our unit is following the sedan. Elena watched the screen. Why would they stop following me? Adrian's eyes narrowed. Because they were not following the vehicle to take you. Daniel looked at him. They were checking where it was going. Adrian's phone vibrated. A message appeared from an unknown number. Bring your wife to the old Halstead warehouse before midnight. Come alone, or the evidence against her goes public. Elena read it over his shoulder. Attached were forged bank documents, security logs, and photographs designed to make her look like she had been secretly helping the Valentis for months. Adrian looked at the clock. 11:17 p.m. 43 minutes, Daniel said. Elena's breathing slowed. They still think I am with you. Adrian looked at her. And that gives us an advantage. Reed's voice suddenly returned over the speaker. We found the sedan. Driver abandoned it. But there is something inside. A moment later, a photograph arrived on Daniel's laptop. On the passenger seat was another Moretti ring. This one had a black stone. Adrian stared at it. Daniel whispered, Vincent. Elena looked at Adrian, expecting rage. Instead, something close to grief crossed his face. Vincent had been beside him after the old betrayal. Vincent had helped bury the dead, rebuild the family, and teach Adrian that trust was dangerous. Then Daniel's phone rang. He answered, listened for 3 seconds, and went pale. Adrian, Vincent is at the Moretti house right now. Adrian looked up sharply. Doing what? Daniel swallowed. He called the family council. He says you have been compromised by your wife and must be removed before midnight. Elena felt the room tilt. The trap was bigger than the warehouse. Vincent was not trying to steal money. He was trying to take Adrian's empire while framing Elena as the reason he had become weak. Adrian reached for his coat, then remembered it was around Elena's shoulders. She removed it and held it out to him. He did not take it. Instead, he closed her fingers around the fabric. Keep it. Elena looked at him. Where are you going? To end this. Then I am coming. No. She stepped closer. You said it was my choice. Adrian's eyes locked with hers. For a long moment, the Mafia Boss and the waitress stood inches apart, the dangerous world around them narrowing to one decision. Then Adrian nodded. Beside me, not behind me. At 11:31 p.m. they walked out of Bellini's together. And 30 miles away, Vincent Moretti stood before the family council, placed forged evidence on the table, and said, "By midnight, Adrian Moretti will no longer be boss." The Moretti house was already glowing against the dark Chicago sky when Adrian's SUV reached the gates at 11:46 p.m. Elena sat beside him in the back seat, his coat still around her shoulders, one hand resting over the place where her name tag had been torn from her uniform hours earlier. Adrian looked at her once before the doors opened. "You can still stay in the car." Elena met his eyes. "Not tonight." He nodded, and together they walked inside. The family council had gathered beneath the chandeliers of the main hall, surrounded by dark wood, marble floors, and generations of Moretti history. Vincent stood at the center of the room with forged documents spread across the table. Luca stood several feet behind him, pale and confused. When Adrian entered, with Elena beside him, every conversation stopped. Vincent smiled as if he had been expecting exactly this. There he is, the man who put one woman above his family. Adrian did not look at him. He pulled out a chair for Elena first. "Sit if you want." Elena shook her head. "I would rather stand." Adrian's expression softened for half a second. Then he faced the council. "Show me the evidence." Vincent pushed the papers forward. "Transfers authorized under Elena's credentials, communications with Valenti contacts, security access from Bellini's. Your wife has been working against you." Several men murmured. Elena stepped toward the table before Adrian could speak. "Then explain why the transfer was created from a private laptop, while security footage proves I was working downstairs." Vincent's smile faded. Daniel entered behind them, carrying the laptop from Bellini's. Detective Reed followed with 2 officers. "And explain this," Reed said. The video from the parking garage appeared on the large wall screen. Marcus stood beside the hidden man. His voice filled the room. "Use the wife to break the husband." Vincent's face remained controlled until the hidden man's hand appeared on screen. The black-stoned Moretti ring flashed beneath the garage lights. Luca stared at Vincent. "Uncle?" Vincent laughed once. "A ring proves nothing." Elena stepped closer to the screen. "Then maybe your own words will." Everyone looked at her. Earlier, while watching the footage at Bellini's, Elena had noticed something the others had missed. The hidden man never showed his face, but when Marcus mentioned the restaurant plan, he tapped the side of his wrist 3 times. Elena had seen Vincent make the same gesture during their wedding dinner whenever he became impatient. It was small, almost meaningless, except Daniel had searched old family security recordings during the drive. Now those clips played beside the garage footage. Vincent repeated the identical motion again and again. His face finally changed. Adrian looked at him with something deeper than anger. "You taught me never to ignore patterns." Vincent's eyes hardened. "I taught you everything. Then you became weak." He pointed at Elena. "Because of her." Adrian stepped forward. "No, because of her I finally learned the difference between weakness and humanity." Vincent's voice rose. "You risked this family for a waitress." Elena removed Adrian's coat from her shoulders and placed it carefully over the back of a chair. Half her hair was still uneven. Her uniform was wrinkled. She looked nothing like the powerful people surrounding her, yet when she spoke, the room listened. "You arranged for strangers to humiliate me because you thought shame would make me disappear. You framed me because you thought Adrian would stop trusting me. You were wrong about both of us." Vincent reached toward the documents, but Reed stepped forward. "Do not touch anything." Additional officers entered the hall. The abandoned sedan, the digital records, the Bellini footage, and Marcus's recovered files had given Reed enough evidence to move forward with an investigation. Vincent looked around the room and realized the council was no longer standing with him. Luca removed his ring and placed it on the table. "You used our family name to destroy your own nephew." Vincent was escorted away without another word. When the doors closed behind him, the room remained silent. Adrian looked at the council. "Anyone who believes loving my wife makes me unfit to lead can leave tonight." Nobody moved. Then Adrian turned toward Elena. In front of everyone, he reached for her hand, but waited until she placed hers in his. "And anyone who speaks her name will speak it with respect." Hours later, after statements were given and the house finally became quiet, Elena stood in Adrian's bathroom staring at herself in the mirror. She touched the uneven edge of her hair and finally let the tears come. Adrian appeared behind her but did not tell her to stop crying. He simply stood there until she turned toward him. "I look terrible," she whispered. Adrian shook his head. "You look like the woman who walked into a room full of powerful men and refused to shrink." Elena laughed through her tears. "That is a very dramatic answer. I married a dramatic waitress." She smiled for the first time that night. Adrian gently wiped one tear from her cheek. "Tomorrow, you can cut it shorter, leave it uneven, shave the rest, or do nothing. Your choice." Elena looked at herself again. For years, other people had made her feel as though she needed to become smaller to deserve kindness. Tonight, she finally understood that dignity had never depended on their approval. She leaned into Adrian, and he wrapped his arms around her carefully. Months later, Elena returned to Bellini's, not as an employee begging for a shift, but as a partner in the restaurant's new worker protection program after the property changed management. Adrian never asked her to stop working. He only asked that she never mistake independence for having to face everything alone. Their marriage was no longer hidden, and Elena never apologized for the space she occupied again. The waitress they tried to humiliate became the woman who exposed a betrayal that could have destroyed an empire, and the mafia boss everyone feared discovered that protecting someone did not mean controlling her. It meant standing beside her when the world tried to make her feel small. So what would you have done if you were Elena that night? Walked away quietly, or stood your ground, even when everyone powerful seemed against you? If this story kept you watching until the end, subscribe to the channel for more emotional mafia boss stories about danger, loyalty, healing, and the people brave enough to choose love when everything is on the line.